Right.
That's all it's for. Like the Living Center, that doesn't qualify.
No, I'm not talking about the Living Center. I'm talking about Minto and Manley.
Yeah.
They needed capital improvements, or Tananoff, they needed capital improvements. The state pays for all of it right now, right?
No. In the REAs, it might by a grant through their process because the state of Alaska runs their government through the schools through the REAA. But for Nenana, if we went, like the schools that are built now, I think there were 3 or 4 projects when those schools were built because the old Franklin K. Lane School got torn down. The city got a bond and built those buildings and built the schools, and they were reimbursed whatever percent it was at the time. I think the last big job was back in the 80s when they did the high school. And I don't know what the financial numbers look like.
But there is something to be said for what you're saying. If you're in the REA now, if you're in part of the Yukon-Koyukuk School District, basically the state and feds are providing most of your funding. The Yukon-Koyukuk School, the superintendent, I've talked to her quite a bit. She's amazing at writing grants, so she's also bringing in, but it's again from the state and the feds. So it's true, if you wanted a piece of, an improvement to the schools, you would probably, and you weren't able to get state or federal funding, you can still ask, like we all do, then you have the opportunity to bond. Well, that also means you have the opportunity to pay. It depends what your perspective is on that. Either you can control your own destiny, or else they're taking your money. So but yeah, you would be paying more. The question is, who is it that's paying more? Where's that money coming from is what I think you got to be thinking about, but that's really true. Yes?
I wanted to thank you for all the work you've done in getting this done. There was talk in the beginning about giving the money back and not having any study done, whatever, and we didn't need this done, and I feel a lot more at ease having a lot of numbers and looking at this, and even if we come up with the same decision that nobody's interested in us and it was all, a bunch of hoopla, whatever, that didn't need to be done, still it's sort of official. We've got numbers to back it up. Perhaps Fairbanks and Denali can even look at this and realize themselves that, yes, there is no interest, and I don't know anybody that actually wanted to be a borough or wants to be a borough. It's in my mind anyway, and a lot of people here that I've talked to, more a matter of if we were forced to be, because I thought it was mandated by the Constitution that every place had to be a borough, and that the unorganized borough was not going to be recognized forever or would start getting taxed. And that would mean, irregardless of whether it was economical or not, we would have to look around and ask, what our options were and what we ought to do. So I'm very glad that this was done and that we have a lot of these numbers.
Hi there. Hi. A couple of things regarding the Tananoff Borough merge idea. The pipeline was about 6% decrease, and now it's 8.2% decrease. And in the decreasing the assessed value will bring in less money in the future. And I guess my concern is, according to your report, you're looking at maybe that we're compatible with that type of a borough and that that's feasible. But if it keeps decreasing, then what will happen is the people will carry the burden of those taxes, and that concerns me because there's not only some people pay taxes, and then I could foresee taxes going up and then us losing our property, and then I can foresee the school closing down and stuff like that in the future if we don't financially meet those obligations if the pipeline continues to decrease. So that's my concern, is that even though you said that it's in a snapshot, the fact of the matter is, the fact that you said it's okay to be feasible, this is going to go to, like the boundary commissioner as, oh, they're feasible. And that's that. And also, I hear from one source that this 20-mile road that goes over this bridge is paid for by the state, is going to be maintained by the state. But then when we ask the state says we're not going to touch that road. That's going to be maintained by the city of Nenana, so therefore it would be maintained by the borough. So was that included in your calculations that we as a borough would be maintaining 20 miles of road to this natural gas idea and all the work that will go into that road? Because the state said that they absolutely will not take care of that road because it doesn't meet their requirements for the way it was built.
So what I did was I looked at the existing Nenana city budget and then said, boom, if there was a borough, what would the differences be just due to borough formation? So I didn't look at an oil and gas field, I didn't look at extending the road, I didn't look at any of that. And that's part of what I was saying is like, it's good to just isolate the effects of forming a borough, but it's a bit misleading because things do change in the future. So what you'd want to do, if you were serious, is you'd look at the budget and you'd go, I see she added $20,000 for public works in here. I don't think that's going to be enough. That should be, $70,000 or whatnot. What does that do to the budget? And as we discussed, it's not a real, big nest egg budget. So those are the good kind of things you got to be thinking about if you want to look at this or respond to things.
And thank you, and that makes sense. But because we're only going to look at it for a little bit of time, if you submit this as permanent, even this gives the boundary commissioner power to really force us into an election. And
It really doesn't.
I don't want to have this report be submitted in this fashion. Is there a way that you can put on there that this section 5 is not correct, like is not accurate for the future, and somehow put a clause in it that it's not, so it doesn't have that much power?
Well, I appreciate your comments. I think I've pretty much qualified that in the report and stuff, and it's not being submitted to anyone, just so you know. It's being submitted to the city. It's not going to the local boundary commission. But I really encourage you to write up your comments and concerns, and let's get them into the record in the appendix, because then you can always go back to that appendix and say, see, back in March of 2014, we were already raising these concerns. So I really encourage you to do that. Sir, and then let's just keep going around.
Yes, ma'am. I see that you're well versed in the funding of schools and everything, and I have sort of a negative bias question to ask you about school funding. And I have a lot of people that are interested in your answer, so if you can't do it right now, that's fine. But there's a number of us having meetings. And if you look at Bear Creek, south of here, south of the bridge, at the Rex Bridge, we're interested in leaving the Denali Borough from Bear Creek on this way. And so my biased question to you would be, the state funding, if the Anderson School was attached to Nenana, how can we figure out what the state funding will be then for Anderson Schools? Because we'd be back to the old system where we're free from home government. And ma'am, the reason this question's come up is the Denali Borough did not keep their commitments of the promises when they made the borough. They got into land controls and issues that they promised would never happen if they become a borough. And of course, they weaseled in there and twisted them all up, and we don't want to be in it anymore. So we just need to know what you think that the cost of how the funding would work if we attached to the Nenana School and that we went back to the old system from Anderson School. Thank you.
These taps, pipeline numbers, they range by a factor of about 4, depending on the source. Why do you, what's the difference between net present value and capitalized value? And why do you use capitalized value instead of net present value?
Ooh, that is just, I don't know. I don't know. This is what I know.
Well, those are huge numbers.
Yeah. These are the numbers that the state is using for assessing, for collecting property tax off of the pipeline. And I am just using what the state is using. They are being, you know, they just settled the litigation on the 2006 number. There's other pending litigation. 2011 is not being litigated.
There needs to be some justification as to why those numbers are what they are. Those are very big, important numbers.
Absolutely, and that's what the State Assessment Review Board and the State Oil and Gas Assessor spend a lot of time working on, and I'm just using the numbers and the range that they're giving me. Boy, yeah, those are really big questions.
So tagging on to Brent's question, yeah, I read this thing and clarification purposes.
Yeah.
Do I understand correctly that there are currently communities that have collected tax monies from Trans-Alaska Pipeline that they are at risk of having to pay back because TAPS is litigating to have the assessed value renegotiated?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and I asked the oil and gas assessor that question. I said, so if you were a municipality that was really conservative and, you know, you were getting your $200 million this year off of tax, you'd probably not spend it because you know that there's litigation going on and you might have to give some back. This is Fairbanks is in this position, and he said, yep, if you were smart, that's what you do. Has any municipality done that? No. They are spending it. And, I mean, the three we're talking about are Fairbanks, North Slope Borough, and the city of Valdez. They're the primary ones. So the question is, gosh, how is the state going to get that money back from the cities or the boroughs as a result of the changing values? And it's like, you know, will they get it back? I don't know. I mean, but you're asking totally the right question. If a borough formed here, you know, the middle Tanana Yukon borough, they would have to make a decision. Gosh, we're getting $7 million a year from the pipeline, and we want to put 1.5 in our borough permanent fund, and we want to spend this and do that. Should we put some in escrow and hold it as a result of, you know, litigation coming down the pipe, or do we want to be just like everyone else and spend it? Could they come after our borough permanent fund? That would be a really good thing to try and figure out. This is part of these real, you know, does the risk outweigh the benefit or the benefit outweigh the risk? This is a really good question that you're raising.
Well, my assessment is that when it comes to a deep pocket, certainly TAPS is far more financially capable of litigation than any community entity would be.
I mean, as just like a lowly resident of the state, I look at this stuff and then I look at the $416 million that went to North Slope Borough and Fairbanks and Valdez, and it just makes you, you know, you're staggered. You know, that was last year. So I don't know how you weigh it out. So yes, just keep going around the room.
So I guess two questions. First one, you talked a lot about education, and I appreciate that, but I don't remember hearing or seeing, and I know it's come up in other meetings that talk about emergency services and how that would transfer in the different scenarios and what that cost would look like. And I've got some ideas as to what that would look like just because of my involvement in that here locally, but kind of curious if you had some opinions on that.
Yeah, well, I didn't, except for in the Nenana, the scenario 2, the city dissolves, and so the borough offers all the same services as the city and the borough, right? So I think, right here, we added, let me see, public safety. Added a $22,000 increment into the public safety budget to compensate for, you know, ambulance or fire calls out the road system that you may be doing them anyway and not getting compensated, but we added an increment into the budget to cover you that theoretically taxes from that area would help support. That's the only scenario where we really look at public safety, because the other ones just look at education, planning, and taxation. I just finished working with the Prince of Wales area, big island down in southeast, And in addition to the 3, that was the fourth service that they wanted to take on island-wide if for a borough, if they want to do it, was emergency response. But I did not look at that here.
Yes, and the other thing I wanted to ask about, the city does have some other high-valued assets, the airport and the port being the two that kind of come to mind. And Nenana is very rare in the fact that one of only 4 other places in the state that has a municipal airport. All the other airports in the state are state-owned. There might be a borough-owned airport in the Northfield Borough, but I don't know that for a fact. So my guess is what would happen to those assets in the different scenarios, and I'm pretty sure that would have to be determined if one scenario came up floated to the top, but that's probably something that should be
Right.
done in the appendix.
The only one, it's like, you know, under the Middle Tanana Yukon Borough, the city of Nenana stays the city of Nenana, and all of the services it continues to do and offer stay city services. The only thing that really changes is education, and, you know, planning could come back, flex the taxes. So for the Nenana, borough scenario, the airport and the port, they've got their own, they're part of the Port Authority. It would stay the Port Authority. It would just become like the Borough Port Authority now. I mean, there are choices there's 2 separate votes if you went this way. You got to vote to dissolve the city and you got to vote to form the borough. And they both have to pass for the borough to form. You would be specifying on that petition and on the ballot which liabilities and assets were transferring, and if there were any that weren't, you know, and how that would work. You spell that out in the petition so that the voters know what they're voting on. But I didn't really look at that, but that's kind of the answer for how that works.
If you want, this is doing pretty good right now, but let's see how I have
Thank you. In reading, comparing the 2 reports, I see that you really have responded to the comments of the community, and I really appreciate that. It's been noted. Keep it up. But I have a real issue. You mentioned very accurately that Denali has 2 sources of very reliable income. The Usability coal mine has been in existence for 70 years, second cleanest coal in the world, and the future is good there. And the tourist industry will, I guess it's going to thrive as long as people worship the creation rather than create art. They're going to be flocking to the foot of the Denali, so I think they're going to be in good shape. I personally feel like there's a real, Nenana would be in jeopardy if we relied only on one source of income, realizing that the pipeline taps, oil started flowing through in 1977. The life expectancy of that pipeline was 20 years. We've exceeded the life expectancy of the pipeline by 17 years. You saw a couple of years ago where there was a maintenance issue up at the North Slope, and it almost turned into an 800-foot licorice stick. When if that happened, those numbers would have changed radically. I really believe that for Nenana or this area to put all hope in an aging pipeline is very high risk. When you talk about farming, but I would like to remind you of in Delta how the government put bison out in Delta, then they enticed the farmers to go out there, but then the bison were getting into Greeley, so then they just herded the bison off, and pretty soon we have $350,000 worth of bison damage in the farms. The state promised they built silos. They promised the farmers, we'll build you a railroad so you can get your product to market. Never happened. I'm just encouraging you, even if they hit a gusher in oil out here, the regulatory process is so rigorous and so onerous. It'll be 10 years if they hit a gusher tomorrow. 10 years before you see a penny out of that pipeline. So I really believe it's risky to hang all your hopes on one source of income. I understand that there's problems in the borough in terms of debt. I understand there's problems in the borough just in terms of unequal services. But as a rookie legislator, I was just new to the whole game. I had your $350 million debt wiped out until the last day. Somebody at finance took it out. But I'm just saying, with a little bit of cunning and craft and a little bit better lobbying, I bet we can get that debt wiped out because Nenana has a good reputation. Galena has it sounds really good, but Galena had, the only way they were making it all in Galena is they had 5 million gallons of fuel given to them. They burn 1 million gallon a year. They have a $5 million liability now. And that if your $3.5 million is nothing. This other district's asking for $3, $5, $4 million for these new regional schools. You're already established. You have a proven track record. I believe it'd be very easy to wipe out that $3.5 million debt. So, I'm trying to talk fast here. I don't believe there's any gain you could get, any economic gain you could get monetarily or land that would offset the risk you would be taking by voting for a borough in any form. And we talk about the basic assumption here is that if we get more money, we're going to have better education. I received a degree in cross-cultural education, 1979. I've been a teacher in villages and all over the state. I've traveled all over the state. I was in Manly last week, Ellicott the week before. And I can tell you, we need to fund education. But more money does not mean better education. The whole educational system's broken. And it doesn't matter how much money you throw at it, it's still going to be broken. So we do need to fund education, but I don't think the risk you would be putting yourself and your property in is even close to worth what you would have to go through if you did adopt a borough. So I'm learning just like you. I'm thankful for the information in this study. I walked into it, very uninformed, and so I'm learning along with you. But I would really urge you not to take that risk until somebody can conclusively prove to you otherwise. Concrete, not just pie in the sky. Hope we find some, have good potatoes across the river. Thank you.
All right. Yes, sir.
Have you been approached by anyone or any entity yet to write a petition?
And can I just respond to the question that you raised at the very beginning? I'm just looking here and I'm at the scenario for the borough, and I can see that in the revenue for the Middle Tanana Yukon, I assume no PILT coming in, but in the expenses, I assume distributing the PILT that comes to Nenana and Tanana to them, because if you form a borough, I sort of ignored PILT, but if you form a borough, the PILT goes to the borough too. Right now, Tanana and Nenana both get PILT. So I do have a little inconsistency in here. It's like if I'm assuming that it doesn't come in, that it shouldn't be going out. That actually would reduce the expenses by $153,000. But I need to be consistent on both sides of the ledger. So I appreciate that, and I think what I am going to do is just ignore PILT because it's, yeah.
Well, I have several other issues with that budget anyways. The borough manager payment went up to $150,000 from the original draft that I saw, which was $100,000. So I was wondering where that $50,000 was. Oh, well, why?
Yeah, well.
And then an assessor, because from what I understand, you guys have an assessor come twice a year and is paid $7,500 a pop. So I don't know where that comes from. Actually, I have quite a bit to say. I came all the way from Manly Hot Springs. I came with permission to speak for lots of members of my community, along with permission from my tribal council that I'm a member of.
You want to use the mic by any chance?
Awesome.
Is that?
Okay, I came all the way from Manly Hot Springs to speak on behalf of members of my community and the tribal council. I also have a copy of a TCC resolution that was signed during convention last week, and all of this says we don't want a borough. TCC says they refuse to be forced into being part of a borough situation. After reading the whole entire report and careful examination of the numbers and wording of it, it lacks not only valid reasoning for a borough, it either neglects to provide the research. The numbers contained within the report prove the math faulty in situations like the budget, and I can point out more of those. Let's see. One big thing I have, like I said, lots to say, but there are 4 criteria outlined within the draft, and there are a sufficient population of a socially, culturally, and economically joined area. 2 is the logical geographical boundaries. 3 is an economic base able to support a borough. 4 is communication facilities for land, air, and water transportation. My question is, what evidence is presented in the study that makes the case for any of these? I don't understand. As commissioned to study borough possibilities, I would think that they should at least be addressed, because from what I read, I didn't see any evidence that proves something like a place like Stevens Village has anything to do with communities like my own, or Live and Good. I mean, other than being on the road system and able to create revenue from the pipeline, from proximity to the pipeline. It doesn't fill any of the other requirements. And also one of the things that illustrates the difficulty with something like the communication over land, it was a pain in the butt getting here. I had to have somebody fly me in, and I don't see anybody else from Manly here, or Minto, or anywhere else. Oh, and thank you, Lori. I have a petition that's been signed by 47 members of the community of Manly and the surrounding area that say we don't want a borough.
Yay! Yay!
What's that?
Is the petition too long to read?
I don't think so.
Just a statement.
We declare as a public statement that we formally refuse to give our consent to be annexed into an existing organized borough, city government, or be formed into a newly organized borough. And like I said, signed by 47 people.
Good.
So I was mentioning a couple of the issues that I've found in the budget. On page 85, I mean, maybe I have the wrong one, but in addition to the borough manager making an additional $50,000 a year, $100,000 for an assessor, which I'm not, is that the person who determines the worth that we're going to be taxed on? Because that's the second, that's the only other position that makes over $100,000. And the education debt service for the Nenana Student Living Center, I guess I want a little more information, because another page indicates that the original agreement for repayment of that loan was semi-annual payments of $141,000 plus 4.75% interest. So that's double what's being provided. But there seems to be an emphasis on how much more is going towards the education department in the proposed budget. And then in the property tax from other, you used the highest number possible out of the options. It was either 156,000 or 323,000 and some change, and so it makes for a faulty, it makes for a budget in the red, is what it does. And, all right, I guess I'll, the only other thing I'll say about that, even though I really could go on all night, but I want to go home too. All of these, the things listed in the budget deal with only the 3 mandatory services. That cracks me up, because one of them is the taxation, and I never thought that getting taxed would be considered a service to me.
Yay!
What's that?
Ma'am, when you go back home, please tell the chief when you get back there that we think he's a terrific leader and we thank him very much.
Yep.
Okay.
He's been a blessing for us.
Okay, great,
Thank
I will.
Yep.
So you should either make sure that you submit your comments and the petition to me at some point so I can include this in
Well,
the...
I've got, I think I've already forwarded some of the emails to you, but I have 21 pages of comments
Okay.
on that kind of were.
So do you want to give them, I actually haven't, I don't
I've
think...
emailed you. My name's Kate Brooks. I know you've gotten them. I've several.
Since this March
Yeah,
draft
I've
has
sent
come
you
out?
2. I've sent you at least 1.
Okay, well, anyway, we'll make sure, I didn't know who you were, so now I have a face to put with your comments or a name, and we'll make sure that I get them and get them into the record.
Okay, good.
Who hasn't spoken yet? Yeah.
I was just wondering who this young lady was again?
My name is Kate Brooks. I'm from Manly Hot Springs.
Who's your mom?
Karen Brooks is my mom. Karen and Julie.
Yes, sir, Mike.
This is just kind of a follow-up question on something that maybe 3 or 4 other people have said.
Could you speak up here so we can all hear? It's
Yeah.
echoing.
Yeah. It helps because it's hard to hear sometimes. That's why you keep getting close to people. What did they say?
I just want everybody to know that this microphone is here because Floyd requested it.
Yay, Floyd!
Because he says I mumble too much. And remember, you have to send all of your comments to her, because a lot of stuff got put in here that we had said in the public meetings, but if you don't tell her, it won't end up in here.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not good enough to just complain about it here. You have to communicate with her in a permanent record. I guess my question is, or comment, people brought up the pipeline revenue and its future projections, and I think it was on page 90. You said, and I think you've said this also in the report. The state oil and gas assessor does not speculate on this, I'm assuming the future of the pipeline, as the department must only assess the value of the pipeline for the current year, not what the future value may be. What I would like to request you to do is to put some sort of projections of the potential pipeline, the oil decline in the future. I know that the state actually has, I think it's the Department of Revenue, I emailed it to you. They do have a bar graph, and the federal government also has produced a bar graph that gives some rough estimates of the oil revenue, not the revenue, but the oil output through the pipeline in the future. And because when I'm reading your section here on page 90, it's like a giant question mark. And we need the question mark to become an answer. Some sort of, it doesn't have to be, like down to the very ounce of oil, but at least, something that gives us, a rough estimate. Because when I was looking at these bar graphs that I provided to you in an email, one from the state, one from the federal government, particularly the federal government saying if we go to a low oil price, the pipeline will be empty by 2025. And I think I was talking, Alan Dick had said something to the effect that the pipeline is guaranteed to decline in production. It's just a matter of how fast. And so, depending on the tax rate that the governor and I believe they're putting that up for a vote too. So that's something I would ask you to put in is some sort of bar graphs or some sort of numbers that would give us an idea what the future projections could be. Anyway.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm a little nervous that maybe I haven't gotten some emails that you think that you submitted, so I think I'm going to make a policy here that if you submit an email, I will automatically respond and say thank you very much for your email so that you know I received it and it's going in here, because like, we need to close that loop. Okay.
Are you suggesting that people re-email?
Well, if it's something, I have gotten maybe like one email since this report came out, so I am wondering, so that's, if you have sent something since this came out, I mean, I can almost check right now. But that's what, I just want to make sure. So who else wants to make a comment or has something for tonight?
Ma'am?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, concerning land allocation, anytime we see these movies, we see maps and everything. If you can become a borough, we can have this piece of land and these are options out for you. Well, ma'am, under the Constitution, state and federal, the state Constitution is a copy of the federal Constitution. If there's a reason that the general public or people want land, part of the Constitution states that the government may not hold land against the interest of the people. That's the law. You can go to your state legislature and get a hold of your state legislators, and you can try to get land allocated to you from the state. You don't have to have a borough to do it or be allowed to by another branch of government. It's a constitutional right to get land from your government. It's built into the basic system of the country. So that window was always there. So if there's a big demand in your community for more ag land or land development, go to your state legislature and see if there's a way that you can get the land allocated to you, because it is the law.
We've actually tried that before. The city has filed to petition some of the lands around here that aren't occupied right now. Specifically, I know a few years back to try and get the agricultural property so that it could be developed,
Right.
sold out, made into farms. Every time the information's been submitted to the state, they've shut it down. They've
Okay.
told us that we have enough land for our area. And I don't know how else we can fight it without hiring.
There's another way. There's another way. No, you've done that, and that's proper. Except the position and the power, the executive powers of the governor of the state of Alaska. Under his job as an executive, he has these powers. If he sees something that's not constitutionally sound or in balance, if there's something that's way off, under Alaska state law, that's how the concealed handgun weapon got pushed through. Under Alaska state law, the power of the governor, he has executive powers to correct a situation like this that you just addressed and you got no address, nobody helped you. But under his position as governor, he has the authority in the state to interact for you and to make sure that the basic constitution of the state of Alaska is fulfilled. His job is to uphold the Constitution and make it work with the executive powers. He has a great position as the state if you get the right guy in there. And that's where you should go next.
You running for governor?
Oh, sit down.
Like in my book?
Can't answer that one.
Sorry. You may think that.
Hi, guys. It's my birthday. I'm here.
Happy birthday!
Thank you. Miss Barbara, on your map for our area, on page 52, you have under the orange section, land that is no longer under state ability to be annexed or allotted by the city because I own it, my family owns it. So I would like, if it would be possible, if you go back in there and double check these places that you have in orange that once were state and no longer are.
You know, the tiny little print on these maps, one of the things it says is that it's only good down to the section level, and I'm guessing that that's what's happened here, but while you're up here, or before, right there. Okay, here, well, when you're done here, just before you leave tonight, you want to circle them or?
Sure.
No, I want to know, I want to. Okay, really appreciate that. Really. I'm very thankful that people are spending the time looking at this in depth. I mean, this is, you know, I got one more chance here to try and dot the i's and cross the t's, so that's much appreciated. Yes, sir.
When you were here for the meeting
back in November, one of the things that was brought up with the middle Nenana Borough option, the large one, was the fact that the local boundary commission would probably not allow 127 miles of pipeline to be included in that option. And you'd stated that maybe only half of that amount would be allowed. So if half of that amount was allowed, the potential income that's shown on the budget on page 85 would be roughly cut in half, which would put the budget in serious trouble.
Yeah, so actually, it's not that they would only allow half of that, it's that when the model borough boundaries for this area were put together, and they're in the report at the beginning, there's a map, this area that's proposed, the middle Nenana Yukon borough, sort of takes the center out of two model borough boundaries. And you know, it used to be that the model borough boundaries was one of those requirements that you really needed to stick to, but that they've really changed that, and it's something that the local boundary commission may look at. But I was suggesting that, if the theory was that you're looking for where the taxable assets to support local government and give them, revenue to operate, that it might be an issue that so much of the pipeline was coming to this area, but there were many villages that weren't included. But in fact, one of the things, because it's been brought up, that we looked at was there actually is about 110 miles of pipeline that would still be in the unorganized boroughs. So I don't know how the local boundary commission or their staff will weigh this or look at it, but it's not like it's all being taken by this area. So I wanted to figure that out. But the comment that you make is right. I mean, if anybody wants to go forward, when you think about the boundaries, there's many things to consider, and some of them are, mandated by the state that you look at. But that's one of the things that you need to think about. So I appreciate that.
Another question on page 45, I know Ms. Brooks was talking a little bit about earlier that the TCC is against this, and I'm not sure how many people are aware, especially with the native corporations, but in your document here it says that any type of zoning or comprehensive land plan and land use regulations that would affect native corporation land within those areas. Could you expand on that so that people can find out the ramifications?
And I tried to give more attention to that in this draft than I did before, because it was raised as a concern and something that really needed to be more explicit. So planning, the three services, whether you consider it a service or not, planning, education, and the ability to tax. So planning, the way